U.S. lawmakers have accused the Department of Justice of improperly redacting files related to late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Members of Congress began reviewing unredacted versions of the files last week, part of the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Democratic Representatives Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie, who co-sponsored the law, flagged discrepancies, saying the DOJ did not comply with the law's requirement. Some files were criticized for containing identifiable email addresses and nude photos of potential victims. The DOJ has since removed flagged files and unredacted some names, including those of Epstein and his associate Ghislaine Maxwell. However, Khanna and Massie argue that the redactions still violate the law, specifically pointing to names that remain obscured. The DOJ responded, claiming a technical or human error and reaffirming its commitment to transparency, but the controversy over the handling of these files continues. Now we welcome Professor David K. Johnston. He's a professor at Rochester Institute of Technology, joins us live from New York. Thank you very much, Professor Johnston, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now looking at this,
good to be here.
Thank you. Now looking at this, a lot of people have raised concerns and criticized this latest revelations, right, including the victims. What do you think? What should be done? And also, do you think that there was a lack of maybe consciousness or towards these victims who have been exposed?
I think the best evidence, having read the statute and seen some of the released documents, is that this is part of a continuing effort of non-compliance by the Trump administration. There are a number of young women whose images are available where it's easy to link data from documents to identify someone. And I don't think that happened by mistake. Given Donald Trump's history and my knowing him for almost 40 years, this is the kind of intimidation tactic, because the message being sent to the young women is, many of whom have never gone public, they operate in court under pseudonyms, is you mess with us, we'll embarrass you. And secondly, the redaction of names in various of the emails seems to clearly violate the statute, because no one is to have their name withheld for reputational value. And there's one other development which I find very troubling. Throughout the Epstein affair, there have been discussions about whether some young women may have been murdered and disappeared. And I've treated those with the same skepticism that I did all sorts of things during the 40 years I did investigative reporting for the New York Times and others. But it turns out that Jeffrey Epstein bought 350 gallons of sulfuric acid. We know that sulfuric acid can be used to quickly dissolve a body, destroy the DNA. It does tend to leave behind micro traces of what's happened. But this is a very troubling development that is going to need a lot of attention, because if it was used for foul purposes, that puts a whole new picture on the repeated failures of federal officials and Trump appointees to properly investigate what was going on here.
Right, that is exactly so disturbing. Now, also looking at, Jeffrey Epstein's associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, has appeared virtually from Texas prison. However, she refused to answer the U.S. House Oversight Committee, right? So what happens, and what about the justice?
Well, there's a lot of talk in this country, in the U.S., that Trump is going to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell. He will never do that. He may grant her clemency. If he pardons her, she can be required to testify because she has no legal jeopardy, and if she refuses, she can be given a prison sentence for refusing to testify. If he gives her clemency, she's still in legal jeopardy, and she can exercise her Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. but she is not going to do anything that will upset Donald Trump while she is trying to get him to spring her from prison. So this was mostly an exercise by the Republican leaders of the committee in Congress in trying to say, see, we're really looking for everything, when there was no reason to expect she would testify, and she is not.
And how do you think this whole thing is affecting the transparency or the public trust towards also the administration, of course, and DOJ, and also the image of political elites in the West?
Yeah, I think this is really having quite a profound effect. And one of the big issues being discussed in American news organizations and online chats is the fact that the British and some other foreign countries have taken items about their sovereigns or diplomats in the Epstein files and are aggressively pursuing them. Keir Starmer may well have to resign as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom because his appointee as ambassador to the US is all over the Epstein files. That's causing a lot of discussion about why is it that the Europeans are aggressively pursuing these matters and we are not in the US. And of course, the reason is because Donald Trump is running a protection racket here. He is in the files more than 5,000 times, and there have been some US commentators have pointed out that God is referenced in the Old Testament and the New only about 4,000 times. Trump, though, insists, I never did anything, I did nothing wrong. And as I warned would happen, well, I think a year or more ago, the Justice Department's position is that they can't release many of the documents, including photographs or videotapes that would show grown men in compromising positions with girls as young as 13, because under American law, mere viewing of such an image is a felony. And so they have the perfect setup here to withhold what would be conclusive evidence, photographs from the Epstein estate of various men in sexual acts with girls who are not old enough to give consent, that is, who are being raped.
Thank you very much, Professor Johnston, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we stay on this news. Now, the U.S. Justice Department has moved to overturn the conviction of Steve Bannon, former advisor to President Donald Trump in connection with the January 6 Capitol attack. Bannon was sentenced to 4 months in prison for contempt of Congress after defying a subpoena to testify before the committee investigating the attack. He was released in October 2024. The Justice Department filed a motion in the Supreme Court seeking to send Bannon's case back to a lower court. In the filing, they request that the case be dismissed with prejudice. Bannon, who has yet to comment, is set to not oppose the motion. Now we welcome back Professor David K. Johnston. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying with us. The U.S. Justice Department has moved to overturn the conviction of Steve Bannon, former advisor to President Donald Trump in connection with the January 6 Capitol attack. Bannon was sentenced to 4 months in prison for contempt of Congress after defying a subpoena to testify before the committee investigating the attack. He was released in October 2024. The Justice Department filed a motion in the Supreme Court seeking to send Bannon's case back to a lower court. In the filing, they request that the case be dismissed with prejudice. Bannon, who has yet to comment, is set to not oppose the motion. The U.S. Justice Department has moved to overturn the conviction of Steve Bannon, former advisor to President Donald Trump in connection with the January 6 Capitol attack. Bannon was sentenced to 4 months in prison for contempt of Congress after defying a subpoena to testify before the attack. He was released in October 2024. Now we have a breaking news coming in. According to health officials,